Welcome to the Inquiring Cat Does Politics this week. And I was going to try and avoid talking about the American election and the inauguration of Donald Trump. But of course, it's impossible to avoid because it's the biggest news story of the week. I don't know if you watched the inaugural process. I certainly did. And it was very interesting. It was inside the rotunda for the first time since Reagan had to do that some many years ago. Now, my first takeaway was that the representative of the Billy Graham Evangelical Institute made political points during his prayers, basically damning Biden's administration for the previous 4 years. And I thought that was inappropriate because the country is so bipartisan already. It doesn't help when you have ministers on such a dignified occasion politicizing it, whatever he may think personally or from a faith perspective. So I wasn't very impressed with that. But when it comes on to Trump's address himself, I have to say that apart from the cringe-worthy opening bits when he basically damned the previous administration without grace, it was an inspiring and a rallying cry for the American people. Now, I don't burn a candle for Trump, and many of us find him personally fairly repellent for his TV persona. But I think he's an interesting character. I think there's two sides to him. I think there's a television persona performer type that comes out with some outrageous comments. And then there's the politically savvy Donald Trump. And I, for one, think he did a great thing, as I said in a previous broadcast, by holding NATO to account. Why on earth should America be subsidizing our military? They should be just participating in NATO on an equal basis and holding China to account. But there are many things that he said in his speech which will have cheered the heart of the common man. Now, of course, the point is that those of you here in the UK on the left who are not very enthusiastic about Donald Trump, and indeed the Democrats, because they're so partisan over in America, will say that it was a terrible speech and that it was just awful. Well, you know, there was some very interesting research done in Britain a few elections ago when potential policies were presented to focus groups without identifying which party these policies came from. And the focus groups would be wildly enthusiastic for some particular policy position until they discovered which party was putting it forward. And then they suddenly didn't like it at all. And that's part of the problem. The stuff that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is prejudged on which party he represents and on the man himself, rather than whether they are right or wrong. Who couldn't want to hear words like, we will expel criminal gangs, we will protect our borders? These are the fundamental functions of government. And there are people here, quite clearly from the rise of reform, who have had enough of our governments failing to tackle some of the essential and basic aspects of government. So I think we're in for an interesting ride. He was very clear about the strategic import of the Panama Canal, and he made a very interesting point in his speech, which was that we signed it over to Panama mistakenly, but we didn't sign it over to China, who now effectively control it. Now, the extent to which that is true, or whether it's just hyperbole, I don't know, because I'm not well informed about that well enough. But it was a great bit of speech writing, whoever put that line in there. Thankfully, he didn't mention Greenland, but don't hold your breath. That's probably coming down the wire fairly shortly. So it was an inspiring speech, I think, for many Americans. And you know, I heard a Democrat commentator saying a few weeks ago that the terrible secret truth is that there are many Democrats who are very pleased that Trump won. Not because of Trump, but because they had absolutely no faith in Kamala Harris being able to run the country and deliver anything against the American dream. And it was a big vision speech today, and it was full of dreams and hope and positivity. And I know from my own experience of spending much time in America that even the elderly car park attendant sweeping up the leaves still has a belief in the American dream and their possibility of rising to great heights and of material wealth. And that's something which I think we sadly lack in this country. We don't have enough positivity, and we don't have a big vision and dream the impossible dream. In fact, I think the American economy will be so positive that it'll go gangbusters over the next 4 years. And I'm certainly going to talk to my financial advisor about making sure that my American investments are denominated in dollars rather than pounds, because I think it's going to be a much happier investment environment over there than we're currently facing here, where it is phenomenally doom and gloom. And I've never seen anything like it on LinkedIn, which are the wealth creator community who are every day posting about what an absolute SH1T show it is at the moment commercially here in the UK. The other interesting aspect that came out of it, of course, is that our dear friend, Mr. Starmer, was not invited to the inauguration. And how does this bode for the future? Well, I think Donald Trump is very transactional. And of course, some people like Chris Christie said appalling things about Donald Trump when he was a rival candidate for the leadership of the Republican Party. I mean, I say appalling. They would have been appalling in Donald Trump's eyes. And equally vice versa, I think the other way. Trump said awful things about Chris Christie. But when it comes to rallying around the Republican flag, all that was forgotten and they're sort of best mates. So will that be the attitude of Donald Trump to the British government with the things that have been said by Starmer and David Lammy? Well, only time will tell. And I think on the face of it, I wouldn't worry too much about those missteps, those political minefields that those two guys went into. I think what's more interesting is we have not yet heard whether or not the Trump administration will accept Peter Mandelson as our ambassador to Washington. He is Starmer's big hope because of Mandelson's politically savvy background, and he's a highly intelligent man. He thinks he's the best guy to negotiate with Trump over tariffs when they, it seems, inevitably come in various shapes and forms. And so I think that we have to wait and see. But the best story of the week, I thought, was that Trump's legal team, the government legal team in America, have decided to prosecute and pursue the 100 Labour staffers who went over to help Kamala Harris during the election campaign because apparently they failed to register as foreign electoral agents during the campaign. And in doing so, they broke the law. And unfortunately for the government, they can't claim that they knew nothing about it or they're not responsible, because our dear Deputy Leader Angela Rayner stood up in the House of Commons and said how pleased she was that they were going over to do that. And that might turn out to be a very big story in the months ahead if we see the government clashing with America over such a ridiculous and naive thing to have allowed to happen at such a critical time when it was quite clear there was a strong possibility that Donald Trump could come back to power, and with his reputation, rightly or wrongly, correct or imagined, that he's a somewhat vengeful character, it was extremely unwise for the Labour Party not to block these individuals going, even if it was on their own private time and as private citizens. So, interesting week. We will be besieged, sadly, with Donald Trump on the front page of our newspapers for the next 4 years. That's what we had last time he was in power, in a way that no other American president has ever managed to do. And that's because he kicks the can hard, and he's controversial, and he's a great showman. Unfortunately, his showmanship can be somewhat distasteful, but we will have to live with it and work with him in dangerous times. So that's my view of the week. I hope and pray I can think of something, it shouldn't be too hard, to talk about next week. So that's all for now. Have a great week. Put on your tin hat, you're going to need it.